I never imagined I'd discover my wife's betrayal like this. Rain pouring outside, her phone left unlocked, a single text shattering everything I believed. Tonight, Meridian. 8, love you. Not to me. My chest tightened, anger and heartbreak colliding, but I didn't scream. I didn't confront her. Instead, I watched, planned and waited. Every move I made over the next 24 hours was calculated, every secret I uncovered a step closer to something she would never see coming. By the time she realized I knew, it was too late. But the real question is, when the tables turn, will she survive what I have planned? The rain had been falling all morning, persistent and unrelenting, drumming against the roof like some ominous metronome. I sat at the kitchen counter, the mug of lukewarm coffee forgotten in front of me, watching droplets streak down the window. Outside, the world was grey, indistinct, muffled by the rain. But inside, everything was sharp, precise. The way the light bounced off the countertops, the subtle tick of the wall clock, the way my pulse felt like it was just barely under control. Jane, my wife of 7 years, had always had a presence that filled rooms, or maybe it was just my mind magnifying it. She had a laugh that could make me forget the week's stress, and eyes that seemed to read me like an open book. 7 years, and I still remembered the first time I saw her, standing under the neon lights of that dingy little bookstore in downtown Seattle, a paperback clutched to her chest, hair damp from a drizzle that mirrored today's weather. I thought I knew her. I believed I did. The text blinked on her phone, left carelessly unlocked on the counter. Tonight, Meridian. 8, love you. My heart stalled mid-beat, numb disbelief sinking like a stone in my chest. The words didn't belong to me. They were hers to someone else. And suddenly, everything, the small hints I'd ignored, the late nights at work, the hushed tones when I entered the room, snapped into sharp focus. Betrayal, pure cold betrayal. I didn't react immediately. My fingers hovered above the screen, trembling, not from shock but from the heat of anger rising beneath it. A flicker of rage, sharp and burning, coursed through me, but I swallowed it down. I didn't want confrontation, I wanted strategy. I wanted to see her underestimate me just one more time before I moved. I spent the rest of the morning like an actor rehearsing for the most critical scene of my life. Dishes washed, counters wiped, clothes folded, all the mundane motions of domesticity performed with the precision of a surgeon. I wanted Jane to think nothing was wrong, to believe everything was perfect. I wanted her to fall into my trap without a hint of suspicion. Over the next few hours, I scoured her digital life like a detective in a noir film. Her password, predictable as a sunrise, was our cat's name, Muff. With that, the doors to her hidden world swung open. Emails, hotel receipts, photos with him. A man named Mark, a co-worker she had smiled at more times than she had at me lately. Anger bubbled beneath my calm exterior, but more than anything, a dark, precise satisfaction began to take shape. I wasn't going to scream or throw things, or beg for explanations. No, I was going to play the long game. I thought about our life together, the small betrayals masked as carelessness, the lipstick on a collar, the hurried excuses, the faint scent of perfume that wasn't mine. I remembered nights lying beside her, listening to the soft rhythm of her breathing, believing in a love that had been quietly stolen from me. Those memories twisted into a knot of grief and fury. But grief alone wasn't enough. I needed control. I needed to be the one holding the board, the pieces moving exactly where I wanted them. As the afternoon light faded into a rainy grey evening, I plotted. I booked a fancy restaurant with a private room, knowing Jane loved the pretense of elegance. I crafted burner emails and texts, mimicking her tone, creating strings of deception that only I controlled. I envisioned the look on her face when she realized the meticulous web I'd spun, the realization that she had, perhaps unknowingly, stepped into the hands of someone far more calculating than she imagined. And through it all the rain fell, soft at first, then harder, washing the streets outside in silver-gray streaks. It was cleansing in a way, a reflection of the storm that churned inside me. I thought back to the first time we had walked in rain like this, years ago, holding hands and laughing like fools. I remembered the warmth of her fingers in mine, the way she had shivered and I had pulled her close. The memory stung, a reminder of the intimacy that had been so carefully layered over deceit. That night, as Jane returned home, I greeted her with a smile that was calm, almost tender. "Dinner tomorrow?" I asked, voice steady, the calmest part of me hidden behind my eyes. She smiled, a flicker of that old warmth, and I felt the knife twist in my gut, but I didn't let it show. I never let it show. I had control now. I had the first move. And so the rain drummed on, relentless and patient, as I prepared for the first act of a game I had been dealt unwillingly but would play to perfection. The morning after that first glimpse into Jane's hidden world, I woke with a weight pressing down on my chest. Rain had turned the streets into rivers, the sound against the window louder than my thoughts. I stayed in bed longer than usual, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of the storm inside me. Betrayal had a way of unraveling everything you thought you knew, and I felt every thread of our 7 years stretch fray and threaten to snap. I replayed the text over and over in my mind. "Tonight, Meridian, 8, love you." Not a fleeting mistake, not a drunken lapse. Intentional, deliberate. The words burned on the screen like acid. I thought back to the subtle signs I'd ignored, the late-night meetings that were always mandatory, the unexplained credit card charges, the soft laughter over a phone call that stopped when I entered the room. I'd wanted to believe she loved me, but the whispers in the back of my mind were paranoia. But now the truth sat on my chest like a cold stone. I didn't confront her, not yet. I had a better weapon, patience. I had 7 years of knowing her, of understanding how she moved through the world, how she reacted under pressure, how she carried secrets. I knew confrontation would only make her defensive, perhaps even cleverer, maybe even ruin the chance for a clean, controlled revelation. I wanted her to underestimate me, until the moment I struck. So I began my quiet investigation. Jane always left her laptop unlocked when she went into the kitchen or the shower. Her emails were easy enough once I guessed the password. Muffin, our cat's name, something intimate and predictable. What I found inside was worse than I imagined. Receipts for hotel rooms under a false name, photos of them together, conversations dripping with affection I'd once believed belonged to me. Each piece was a dagger, and I held them in my hands without flinching, knowing that my fury had to be tempered with cunning. And yet, amid the cold calculation, a part of me felt hollow. This wasn't just betrayal, it was a rupture of trust, of intimacy, of everything I thought our marriage was built upon. I thought of our wedding day, August 14, 2012, the way she looked in that ivory gown, how her eyes had sparkled with promises that now felt like cruel love. I remembered the nights we stayed up talking about dreams, buying our first house, deciding on Muffin's name together, all of it tainted now, not by a single act, but by the steady, persistent erosion of honesty. I decided to let her continue her evening, to follow the pattern she'd set for herself. If she thought she was clever, then I would allow her to underestimate me completely. I watched as she prepared for work that night, or rather for Mark, her movements casual, unaware, the scent of her favorite perfume lingering in the apartment. I remembered that scent from our early days, how it used to make my stomach flip with excitement. Now it was poison. The next step was delicate. I couldn't rush it. I crafted a burner phone, a device that would become my instrument of control. Every message I would send, every word typed, had to mimic her tone perfectly. My goal was simple: lure Mark into a position where everything he thought was hidden would be exposed, while keeping Jane none the wiser. It required patience, precision, and a strange dark thrill that I didn't expect to feel. I also hired a private investigator, someone discreet, someone who wouldn't ask questions or judge. The PI's job was simple: tail Mark, gather evidence, make sure the narrative I created could be reinforced if needed. I remember sitting in the dim light of my study, watching his profile on a monitor, thinking about how absurdly neat it all had to be. There was a strange satisfaction in building this invisible chessboard, placing each piece carefully, knowing the final checkmate was mine to command. That night, I watched Jane from a distance, her casual confidence sharp against the dreary backdrop of the rain-soaked city. I thought about confrontation again, the thrill of shouting, of demanding answers, but I didn't. Anger alone was not enough. I wanted something cleaner, sharper, more permanent, something that would make her realize she had misjudged me in ways she never would recover from. It was then I realized just how far I'd come from the man I used to be, the one who believed in trust and marriage, the one who had slept beside her with love in his eyes, now calculating every step of her betrayal. I didn't feel proud, I didn't feel guilty, I just felt alive in a way that was terrifying, even to. The storm outside mirrored the storm inside me, and I knew that by the end of this, nothing would be the same. By the time Jane returned from her mysterious meeting that night, I had every detail plotted, the restaurant booked, the burner messages drafted, the PI ready with feeds and recording. I had imagined the moment I would finally reveal everything, a controlled exposure that would leave no room for escape or denial. I would not scream, I would not cry, I would orchestrate the unraveling of her lies with the precision of a master, a king making his move on the chessboard, while the rain continued its relentless percussion, and in the quiet before her arrival, I allowed myself a single thought, a dark whisper under my breath, checkmate in the rain. Soon, the next morning the apartment felt different. The rain had cleared, leaving streets slick with reflection, but inside the air seemed heavier, charged with an invisible weight. I wandered from room to room, watching Jane move through her morning routine with that casual, oblivious grace that had once been comforting. Now it was infuriating. Every smile, every hum, as she brewed her coffee, every careless glance at her phone was a reminder of the deceit I had discovered. It was as though the entire life we had built together had been a fragile glass sculpture, shattered silently while I slept. I remembered how it felt the moment I saw the text: shock, disbelief, an icy numbness, followed by that simmering, precise anger. But now, hours later, that anger had morphed into something colder, something sharper. I couldn't allow myself to simply react. Doing so would be messy, impulsive, messy enough for Jane to wriggle free of accountability. No, I had to let the storm build inside me, let it gather force, and strike in a way that left no escape. Work became a strange kind of sanctuary, or maybe just a mask. I walked through the office, nodding at co-workers, smiling in meetings, all the while my mind replaying every interaction I'd had with Jane, trying to piece together when the cracks first appeared. I thought about the early days, the laughter, the weekend trips, the nights we stayed up binge-watching shows, and making ridiculous plans about travel and life. The memories cut sharply, sweet and bitter at the same time, reminding me that betrayal doesn't erase love, it just contaminates. Emails, receipts, and pictures from Mark flooded my thoughts constantly. I had learned his patterns, his favorite cafes, the way he walked, the subtle things that made him predictable. Every small detail was ammunition, but the most painful part wasn't Mark. It was Jane. How easily she had slipped into this other life, how natural it seemed to her, and how completely she underestimated me. That underestimation was a gift I would exploit fully. That afternoon, I set the first layer of my plan into motion. The burner phone I'd prepared weeks ago became my instrument. I sent the first text to Mark, carefully mimicking Jane's tone, casual yet intimate. Meridian 7 p.m., wear the blue tie. My fingers hovered over the keys longer than necessary, savoring the power that came from knowing he had no idea who he was really communicating with. Every word had been weighed, calculated, and designed to pull him into a trap that even he couldn't see coming. Jane, meanwhile, remained blissfully unaware. She flitted around the apartment, humming, scrolling, brushing her hair back absent-mindedly. I watched her from the doorway, my chest tightening, a strange mix of anger and sadness pulsing through. It was surreal, seeing the person you thought you knew exist fully in one world, while secretly living in another, and yet I felt strangely alive, a cold focus sharpening every sense. I realized how powerful it felt to be the one orchestrating every move, the one holding the invisible string. By evening I had coordinated with the PI, cheap, discreet, utterly loyal to my plan. He was tailing Mark, keeping a live feed, and recording every detail. The realization hit me that I was now operating on multiple levels: psychological, technological, emotional. I wasn't just planning revenge, I was conducting a symphony, and every note, every pause, every crescendo had to be perfect. One mistake, one misstep, and everything could collapse. And yet even with the meticulous plan, the human part of me wrestled with guilt. I remembered moments of tenderness, the quiet evenings we had shared, the subtle gestures of love that had once felt mutual. Part of me wanted to reach out, to plead with Jane, to demand honesty in the old-fashioned way, but I knew I could. That impulse, messy and emotional, had to be suppressed. The plan demanded detachment, precision, and patience, and I had to stay the course. Later that night, as I lay awake listening to the faint patter of rain against the window again, I felt the enormity of what was unfolding. I pictured Jane arriving at Meridian, her excitement, her obliviousness, and Mark, confident in his role, completely unaware of the web closing around him. Every possible outcome played in my mind, each more intricate than the last, and yet I realized, I was also testing myself. Could I carry this through without faltering, without letting the human pain inside me sabotage the strategy? Could I remain cold, precise, and controlled even as my heart felt like it was splitting in two? Sleep came in fitful bursts, punctuated by dreams where the rain never stopped, where Jane's laughter echoed in empty rooms, and Mark's smug face twisted into terror. I woke each time with the same sensation, a combination of dread and exhilaration, like standing at the edge of a cliff just before the jump, and all the while I knew the moment of reckoning was coming fast, inevitable, and irreversible. The fallout wasn't just emotional, it was psychological, a quiet unraveling of the life I thought I knew. I observed Jane more closely now, analyzing every smile, every glance, every casual gesture. She was human, flawed, and predictably reckless. And I too was human, flawed, but in a different way. I had become a predator, patient, calculating, and utterly determined. By the time the rain returned in the early hours of the next morning, soft and steady, I was ready. Every detail was mapped, every step anticipated. The restaurant, the PI, the burner texts, the digital breadcrumbs, they all converged in my mind like a complex puzzle, finally coming together. And somewhere, deep inside, amidst the anger, the grief and the precision, I felt a strange sense of inevitability. This was no longer just about betrayal, it was about reclaiming control, proving that underestimation would never happen again. And so the storm outside mirrored the storm inside me. Every drop that hit the window reminded me that time was short, that the moment of revelation was near. Jane had no idea that the night ahead would change everything, and I was ready to make sure of it. By the time evening rolled around, the rain had returned in earnest, washing the city streets in silver reflections and casting a misty haze over the world. I felt strangely calm, almost detached, as I slipped into my car and started the short drive to Meridian. Every motion, every thought, had been rehearsed 100 times. I knew Jane thought this was just another one of my well-intentioned surprises. Another small gesture of the husband she assumed was clueless. She had no idea how precise, how methodical I had become. I checked my burner phone one last time. The text to Mark had been sent hours earlier, instructing him to arrive at Meridian, blue tie, 7 p.m. The PI had confirmed location, timing, and movements. Every variable had been accounted for, every contingency planned. Yet, a part of me, a flicker I couldn't quite suppress, wondered if things might spiral out of control. After all, this wasn't a board game. This was real life, with emotions that had a way of throwing even the best-laid plans into chaos. Walking into the restaurant, I felt the familiar mix of tension and exhilaration. The host greeted me politely, unaware of the storm I carried beneath my calm exterior. I moved to the private room I booked, the lights dimmed just enough to create an intimate atmosphere, the table set with precision. I let myself pause, inhaling the faint scent of white wine and fresh flowers. In another life, I might have felt comforted here. Tonight it was just another stage for a confrontation that was long overdue. Jane arrived moments later, radiant and unsuspecting. She smiled, kissed my cheek, and complimented the table setting. My stomach twisted, not from love, but from the irony, the cruel symmetry of it. She had no idea that every movement, every step she took tonight had been anticipated, analyzed and used against her, and I realized then that power could be intoxicating, even when it was born of pain. Dinner began as if nothing were amiss. We made small talk, laughter threading through the air like a fragile veneer. I toasted us, raising my glass with a calm smile that hid the storm beneath. Inside, my mind was working 1,000 steps ahead. The PI had confirmed Mark's arrival. He was there wearing the blue tie, just as instructed. My phone buzzed discreetly, live feed from the restaurant's exterior, and then I saw him. But something was off. Mark was not alone. A brunette sat beside him, smiling in a way that made my blood run cold. Confusion sparked for a fraction of a second. This wasn't part of the plan. I excused myself, stepping into the hallway, phone in hand. The PI's mic picked up snippets of conversation that made my jaw tighten. "Jane's just a fling," Mark said, laughing. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Jane hadn't been the primary target. Mark had another affair entirely separate. My plan was unraveling in front of my eyes. But then the deeper truth revealed itself. The brunette, carefully poised, was not an interloper. She was part of my orchestration, the PI's sister, acting the role perfectly. A distraction designed to expose Mark, and by extension, cement Jane's place in the trap. Relief mingled with adrenaline. I could feel the pieces clicking into place again. My hands steadied, my pulse focused. Every setback had been anticipated. I returned to the table, calm, smiling. Jane's face had begun to shift subtly, her eyes flicking toward my phone, a hint of uncertainty shadowing her features. It was time. I activated the next layer. A carefully edited clip appeared on her phone, time-stamped and framed to make Mark's infidelity undeniable. I watched her confusion bloom into fear, the recognition that the game she thought she controlled was now entirely in my hand. Her hands trembled as she tried to speak. I raised a finger, quieting her silently. No shouting, no confrontation, just the cold precision of exposure. I know about Mark, I said softly, deliberately, letting each word land like a hammer. And now you know I'm not a fool. Her face paled, tears threatening. As the realization sank in, the emotional chessboard was set. She understood that every move, every secret, had been anticipated. The moral complexity of it struck me in that moment. I wasn't proud of what I had done, manipulation, deception, blackmail. But I also wasn't apologetic. There was a strange justice in it, a reclaiming of agency that had been stolen by betrayal. I had harnessed my grief, my heartbreak, and transformed it into a tool. And as I watched Jane's shock and fear, I understood that revenge, when executed with care and precision, could feel like a reclaiming of self. The rain outside tapped against the windows, a quiet applause for the revelation unfolding within. Jane nodded, broken, the weight of her choices pressing down like a physical force. I leaned back slightly, allowing the silence to stretch, savoring the equilibrium of control that had been so painstakingly constructed. No dramatic confrontation, no fists, no shouting, just checkmate. And yet, amid the satisfaction, a whisper of something else stirred. Compassion, perhaps, or maybe a haunting acknowledgement of how far I had gone, how deeply betrayal could twist the human heart. I realized then that revenge, even meticulously planned, leaves scars on everyone involved, including the one delivering it. But the storm outside mirrored the storm inside, relentless and unyielding, and I knew the moment demanded completion, not reflection. By the time we left the restaurant, the rain had softened into a drizzle, streets glimmering with reflections of neon lights and headlights. Jane sat silently beside me, the weight of the night pressing down in her gaze. I felt a strange mixture of victory and melancholy. She had underestimated me, yes, but the cost of proving that was not insignificant. Control was mine, but it came with a quiet, sobering price. As we drove home, the city lights blurred through the rain-slicked windshield, a kaleidoscope of color and memory. Jane's silence was complete, and I felt the odd sensation of closure approaching, like the final piece snapping into place on a jigsaw puzzle I had spent weeks assembling. I had turned the tables, reclaimed my power, and yet, I was aware with a weight that pressed against my ribs, that nothing would feel the same again. Checkmate in the rain indeed. The drive home was quiet, the rain having slowed to a gentle drizzle, painting the city streets in muted reflections of neon and streetlight. Jane sat beside me, silent, her fingers folded tightly in her lap. I didn't speak either. Words felt unnecessary. The storm had passed, yet the air between us was dense, electric with unspoken truths. For the first time in days, I allowed myself to feel the weight of what had just unfolded. Not triumph, not vengeance, but the strange, hollow clarity of reality finally revealed. I thought about the years we had shared, the small, intimate moments that had now been tainted, birthdays celebrated, trips planned, quiet nights spent with muffin curled on our laps. Every memory was a ghost, flickering with warmth and betrayal intertwined. And yet, amid the grief and the anger, there was also a strange sense of liberation. I had reclaimed control, not by confrontation or violence, but through precision, patience, and the careful orchestration of consequences. I had made sure that the betrayal could not continue unchecked. At home, I watched her unpack her bag, her movements mechanical, almost alien to me. She avoided my gaze, the shame and fear in her eyes unmistakable. I realized then that the act of revenge, as satisfying as it had been, was only part of the story. There was also the long aftermath, the rebuilding, the reckoning, the psychological weight of knowing that trust, once shattered, cannot be perfectly restored. I understood that her silence was both fear and reflection, a mirror of the inner storm I had endured myself. I made her sit at the kitchen table. I didn't shout, I didn't scream, I simply placed my phone, still displaying the edited clips, in front of her. "You'll confess everything in therapy," I said softly, letting the words sink in. "Your lies, your choices, the truth of what you've done. Or this goes further. Your boss, your friends, they'll see exactly who you are." Her hands shook as she reached out, almost instinctively, to touch the screen, as if proximity could erase her guilt, but there was no erasing now. She nodded, tears forming, the weight of her actions pressing her into submission. And yet, even as I held this power, I felt the moral complexity of my own choices pressing in. I had orchestrated deception, manipulated evidence, and exploited human trust. Was I any less guilty than she was? I had justified it as reclamation, as righteous vengeance, but in truth, I had become part of the storm I had been reacting against. It was a quiet, sobering realization, the kind that leaves marks deeper than any visible wound. The rain tapped against the windows, a rhythmic reminder that the world continued beyond our small, tense apartment. I remembered the first storm we had walked through together, hand in hand, and the contrast struck me like a blow. That version of us, naive and trusting, no longer existed. What remained was something colder, sharper, tempered by betrayal and survival. In the following days we attended therapy, not the dramatic, shouted sessions I had imagined, but quiet, tense conversations with a professional who guided us through confession and reflection. Jane spoke, admitting to every hidden text, every clandestine meeting, every lie that had slowly eroded our marriage. I listened, keeping my calm exterior intact, while inside I grappled with a strange mixture of satisfaction and sorrow. I had forced truth into the open, but at a cost neither of us could fully measure. Mark faded from the story quickly. The edited clip, the controlled exposure, had removed him from our immediate conflict, leaving only Jane and me. I didn't need him to suffer. The revelation of her betrayal was enough to recalibrate the dynamic of power in our lives. I realized then that revenge, truly, wasn't about hurting others. It was about reclaiming your own narrative, asserting control where chaos had once prevailed. Weeks passed, and the rain became memory. The apartment, once a symbol of shared life and love, felt like neutral territory, a stage upon which the events had unfolded. We moved forward, cautiously, rebuilding trust with slow, deliberate gesture. I noticed small things, her gaze lingering when she thought I wasn't looking, my own hesitation before reaching out to touch her hand. Both of us were navigating the aftermath, haunted by choices and tempered by consequence. And yet, I also felt a strange pride, not in cruelty, but in the clarity that had emerged from chaos. I had faced betrayal, raw and unfiltered, and had acted with deliberate purpose rather than blind emotion. The game had been won, yes, but it wasn't the victory I had imagined. There was no gloating, no triumphant relief. Instead, there was understanding of human frailty, of the costs of deception, and of the resilience required to reclaim control of one's life. One night, months later, I stood by the window, watching rain streak the streets, soft and insistent. Jane had gone to bed exhausted from the day's work and the emotional labor of confession. I thought about the night when it all came to a head, the restaurant, the blue tie, the edited clips, the silent power I had wielded. I felt the quiet satisfaction of checkmate, tempered by the humbling awareness that life, like rain, is relentless, unpredictable, and cleanses in its own time. I realized that vengeance is rarely as satisfying as the mind imagines. It doesn't erase hurt, nor does it fully repair but it does reclaim agency, reminds you of your own strength, and forces the truth into the light. And sometimes that is enough to move forward, even if the shadows of the storm linger. As I finally turned away from the window, I felt a fragile equilibrium settling over the apartment, over my mind, over our fractured lives. Jane had learned the weight of her choices. I had learned the power and cost of precision, and the rain, eternal and impartial, continued to fall, witness to everything, unjudging, cleansing, relentless. Checkmate, in more ways than one.